Welcome, everybody. This is Adam Hopler with the law firm of Hopler, Whelms, and Hanna. I am on the webinar here. I'm seeing that we've got about 12 people on. Welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about elder exploitation, trying to understand a little bit about the pathology and legalities of vulnerability. I'm going to be talking to you today with Nancy Ruffner. And she will be joining us here shortly. Nancy is a board certified patient advocate with Navigate, North Carolina. She is working primarily with individuals and family members that are taking care of others, caregivers, if you will. And so what she usually does is focus in on folk that are looking to have a plan, a structure for how they go forward. Myself, I'm an attorney with, again, a law firm. What I'm usually doing is working with folk and navigating the legalities of caring for others. So that sometimes looks in the establishment of an individual setting a plan, a will, power of attorney, things of that sort. But then it can also be dealing with the ramifications of when all that breaks down. So we're going to do a little bit of back and forth here in a few minutes. And I'm looking for Miss Ruffner, and hopefully I'll have her here shortly. But I think we're working through technical difficulty. So let's see here. All right. Oh, it looks like she might have clicked on the wrong link. So we may need to get her on by phone here shortly. Sorry about that, y'all. So, but while I have my staff working on that connection, we'll talk here together for a little bit. So like I was saying, what I'm primarily doing in my role here within the law firm could be described as a type of fiduciary support or litigation, depending on what situation we're dealing with. But in the law, there are different ways that people can take on positions of trust with others. So in the simplest form, if you have a family member that is having difficulty in caring for him or herself on her own or his own, they may deliberately, intentionally take steps to enable you or someone else to be able to care for them. Basic way of doing that, and many people have heard of powers of attorney. And so that's where you say, all right, I want to take my authority to act on my own behalf. I'm going to make a Xerox copy of that, and I'm going to hand it off to someone else. That enables this second person, again, could be you, to be able to do things simple like go to the bank and speak on behalf of somebody. In medical situations, it may look like fielding information that a doctor is giving to try and help understand, potentially make decisions depending on the circumstances, or just help to advise on them. But a power of attorney or an agent means that you are acting with and under another family member. So a mother who says to her daughter, will you be my agent, my power of attorney? In other words, some people will say it that way. And that enables you to be able to act on that person's behalf. That's the basics of what we may talk about legally and acting for someone else. But there can be times where an individual is no longer able to give that kind of authority. And so we find ourselves in a situation where we have to go to the court and establish guardianship. And this can be another way to essentially get the same thing, but instead of making a duplicate copy of the authority, we just start with the original and we hand that off to someone else. And so now, instead of having, say, mom and her daughter working together for the purpose of making decisions, the mom kind of authorizing her daughter to do things, we would just have the daughter or the child or other trusted individual acting on that person's behalf, kind of in their legal shoes. Because in that situation under guardianship, the individual can't act on their own behalf. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that lays into problems of mistrust. So our discussion here of exploitation, when you don't have those things in place, and sometimes when you do have those things in place. And so let me check one more time here and see if I can get a status on Miss Ruffner. All right. Pardon for the technical difficulties, y'all. Appreciate your patience. All right. Let me see if we can do it this way. I'm going to try and see if we can get her on the phone. Okay. All right, we're working on that. So let's take a look at some of the material that we pulled together here and see what we can do here. But and we have somebody working with her trying to troubleshoot right now. But so when we talk about elder abuse and exploitation, it's probably good to even start with what is that? So there can be several forms of it. Certainly financial, emotional abuse that can take place. Those are going to be pretty different. When you have an individual who's gotten older, and we'll talk a little bit about why it is in a moment that a person may become more subject to elder abuse. But when you have a situation like what I was discussing before, where perhaps a person has already been voluntarily given a certain amount of authority by way of like a power of attorney or guardianship, and they're using that authority not to benefit the individual for whom they have a trusted position, for whom they are a fiduciary, but instead using it to benefit themselves or potentially using it to benefit others. And so that's as simple as using money that you have power over, again, for a purpose other than helping that individual. That is oftentimes and can be paired with this type of emotional abuse, where if you don't have legal authority, what you may be doing is employing tactics to guilt an individual or to make a person feel that they have some kind of an obligation to accomplish something. And this can be deliberately done, or it could sometimes be unintentional. You can think about your own relationships that you have with family members and how contentious and somehow and sometimes convoluted that they can be. When you span years of your life, different scenarios that you've been involved in, where maybe you feel like something that's happened in the past has given rise to some kind of an expectation. You treated me poorly as a child, and so now I'm expecting for you to sort of pay back. And so you discuss like how they can do that, or maybe even you treated this little child in a way, and so I want you to do this. But that type of emotional abuse, where you're kind of taking this position of trust that you have to impose upon somebody else an expectation of something. Sometimes it's a little more, neglect is, essentially where you're just not caring for the individual at all. And this can be a fairly damaging situation where an elderly person is seemingly being cared for on the outside, but in reality, they're being left alone. They're not being given any kind of support. they're not able to navigate their own home to get around where they need to be. And so nobody's actually going in there, but it may appear on the outside that a caretaker or other family member is representing to others that they're doing the job or they're on the job. But in reality, that's not actually taking place. Certainly, physical abuse and sexual abuse would be a form of elder abuse and exploitation. It's not as common. What we currently know in terms of gathering statistics and as we kind of learn more about elder abuse is that it is not reported as much as one would think, and certainly not as much as it should be. And so there's a fair amount again, of understanding that what we actually see in the form of elder abuse cases is a underrepresentation of probably the reality of what is experienced on a regular basis by elderly folk. Then, of course, we also have what probably pops in the minds of most people, the spam calls or email, where an elderly person has access to the internet and they're receiving messages, but they just don't know how to filter trusted sources versus untrusted sources. And there's a general assumption that if they're being messaged by someone that must be legitimate, and they give it full faith and credit in the conversation. And this can be as a result of, again, just diminished capacity, but it can also be from loneliness, et cetera. And so, but these are all different forms of the same basic idea, which is elderly individuals that just are being attacked in different ways. And for, again, most of the time, well, I don't know if I can say most, but there's a concern that some people who are exploiting or abusing the individual may actually think that they are doing right, accomplishing something good potentially when they say that they want to benefit others. And then others are doing it deliberately with the expectation that they're going to personally benefit or otherwise subvert what that person wants to accomplish. All right, let's see here. Doing one more check-in, see how we're doing, see if we can get Miss Ruffner on. Okay, so I am checking here, see if I can figure out which user she is. One moment. All right. And I guess maybe just kind of make a quick call here. Nancy, if you are on with us, I need to click and highlight you and bring you up to the front, but I'm not sure which username that you are under at the moment. If you're able to message maybe, or yeah, if you can send a chat, that would be helpful. And I'm also asking staff. Let's see here. Okay, 8615. 8615, invite on the screen. Inviting on. Did that work? Nancy. Well, I think I keep getting her here. Okay, Nancy, it sounds like we need you to accept. I don't know if you're seeing that or not, but we've sent the invitation, and I guess I can do that again if needed. Maybe. Oh, we're so close. Miss Ruffner is actually on, y'all, but we're just trying to get the final connection here. In chat. Well, there she is. All right. Yeah. Let's see here. Nancy, I'm hitting invite for you to come and join the screen. I think you'll need to accept it. See if that will work for you. And hopefully I'm not messing this up. Okay, so it says it's connecting. So, all right, we're so close. All right. Nancy is chatting with us, saying that she's accepted and she can't wait. I think we're all on the same boat there. So, all right. Yeah. Well, and when Nancy comes on, we may go back and kind of hit on some of this, but I know that not everybody will. We did set a specific amount of time, so I'll try to do my best. I'm covering a little bit of Nancy's material, but again, we'll let her come back in and maybe provide some more specific examples of what things that she's dealt with. But yeah, so and now to kind of having to discuss a little bit about what elder fraud is and the different forms that it can take. You know, what I was kind of mentioning on before is underreporting. You know, so it's indicated here, you know, 1 in 44 cases are ever reported. You know, case, you know, most 99% of statistics are made up on the spot, but we pulled this one from somewhere. But generically, it's kind of understood that an unfortunate reality is that we don't get as much reporting of elder abuse as we would like. And there are lots of reasons for that. It can be because of the tight-knit nature of family situations. And folk that want to kind of keep things in-house in terms of resolution. At least that's some of the things that I've seen in terms of the resistance to wanting to report issues. At least from my experience, when I met folk that have said, you know, I don't really know what I want to do with this, and so that can be a conversation. It's just like trying to keep it quiet, not wanting to make a big public deal out of maybe one family member's actions. That probably is more likely in the cases where it's just not clear, like if the intent was there to do harm. But we also can have issues where there's just not somebody to report. And that can be a little bit more of a nefarious situation where you have a situation that an individual is on their own, you know, essentially kind of an elderly individual that does not have maybe children, or that are children that are immediately accessible to them. They're widowed or never married at all, and just generally distant from family members and friends. And so when a situation arises such that they are under the care of one individual, at that point, the reporting of it becomes much more difficult. And so, but this definitely happens. And so we have known about issues of defrauding that have occurred, and just from like national statistics, each year it's in excess of about 3 billion. So I mean, this is a lot of wealth of individuals that's been accumulated throughout their lifetime for the purpose of retirement, and then winds up being misused by others that are either in positions of trust or, again, have kind of assumed or taken them, as the case may be. There's definitely, with the baby boomer generation coming up, a lot of individuals now who are older and with more wealth than what we've historically seen in the past. And so that's becoming more and more of an issue as that particular generation ages, is being subject to the influence of others, and trying to figure out how to manage that appropriately. And so, as indicated at the bottom there, as we've hit on, more than half of the perpetrators of exploitation and abuse that we have seen tends to be by actual blood relatives. All right, doing another status check here. Let's see here. I am going to see if I can get Nancy on by the phone here. Nancy, I'm envisioning that you're probably hearing and observing, but just unfortunately, for whatever reason, things are not connecting. So apologize about that. Yeah, I'm still showing that it's accepted and connecting. I'm not sure why that is not going through, but Nancy, I'm going to try and give you a call here. So this will be a little maybe more traditional than normal, but all right. Here we go. Okay. Gonna give this a try, Nancy. I hope I catch you.
This is Nancy. Hello.
Yay! All right, everybody. Well, looks like we got a little bit of feedback there, and that's probably because of my computer, maybe. Let me see. All right. Yeah, Nancy, see if you can mute your computer. Yeah, okay. Let me let her work on that. All right. Nancy, do you have your computer muted? I think we were getting a lot of reverb there.
Do you have your computer muted? I am trying to do that.
Yeah, I think if you go down to the bottom corner of your screen and just find the regular volume control and just turn it off, you won't need it because you'll be able to hear me through the phone.
I'm sorry, I'm unable to access that volume. I don't know how to do that.
Could you either step away from your computer or just turn the video thing off altogether?
Okay, we'll try that.
Yeah, just that way we don't have the reverb, and I can turn you all the way up.
All right, I'm willing to leave the presentation because I have the slides printed out. Let's try it that way.
That works. Yeah, let's do that. Nope, I'm still getting that reverb.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for patience and allowing us to provide that hearing test.
Okay. Yeah, well, Nancy, let's back up a little bit. I'm moving our slides back just a little bit, but yeah,
okay.
Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? I did the best I could, but I feel like you probably do a little bit of a better job telling us about what it is that you do, and how it is that you're serving folk.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Again, we've got a lot of meat to give you here, so let's blow past me as quick as possible. I'm a board-certified patient advocate and owner of Navigate NC. We help people to navigate the challenges of change. Most of the time, that's aging. So we're dealing with elders and their adult children and loved ones. Most people ask me how I got into this, and like many patient advocates and people in the elder care industry, I have a story too. Just in assisting my parents as they changed and aged, my sister and I thought that we were the two best prepared daughters on the planet. My sister was working for the Triangle J Council on Aging. She was working with the Ombudsman, and I was working at an employee assistance program on the elder care and the legal teams, taking intakes and providing remedy. So my folks aged and passed with our assistance, and I pursued some more education and launched Navigate NC in 2013. Now I was one of the first in the industry to earn the board certification designation, and I also now have new passions. I speak and teach a lot more. My advocacy has gone into education and helping people to learn more about topics like healthcare navigation or patient safety, or the challenges of aging alone or solo. And
yeah.
Lately, how to plan and prepare for your telehealth appointment is getting a lot of traction. And most recently, my work now involves coaching persons within my own industry. I'm helping the small businesses that perform patient advocacy and care management to ramp up, sustain during COVID, ramp up, greeting the new people that are entering our industry. So my new form of advocacy, Adam, is working in advocacy to create more advocates.
Well, excellent. Yeah, Nancy, thanks so much. That definitely helps kind of understand a little more where you're coming from, and what kind of services that you're providing. I provided, I guess, some of we'll say the nuts and bolts, like more literal bullet points of what is elder abuse, exploitation, a little bit about why we're talking it, and was just about to get into what makes elderly individuals targets of it. But I wonder if maybe you have perhaps a firsthand experience or a scenario that maybe helps to highlight a little bit the complexity of the problem that we're dealing with, and when it comes to elder abuse, and why it's such a difficult topic for us to even address.
Yes, and I like that you use the term complexity, because it is. There are several kinds of elder abuse, which you likely went over, but it's all kinds of ways that people abuse. And sometimes it's family, and sometimes it's non-family. We know about the home repair scams where an elder is alerted that something is wrong with their roof or their chimney, and there's been vast water damage, and the senior will never get up on that roof to see it. So the scammer says, "Well, gosh, we need supplies. We need you to give us a check so we can go get the supplies and perform the work," and then they're gone. Most of us are also very familiar with phone scams. I had one just last week where the IRS supposedly was calling me to tell me they were coming to arrest me. Another popular one that folks fall for is the grandchild calling, who supposedly has been arrested and they're in Aruba and they need bail money, and would you please wire me the money? Folks are familiar with foreign lotteries. Hey, if you'll pay the taxes on this lottery, then we can release all the rest of the money to you, says the scammer. We know about online dating, internet scams, romance scams, but speaking to the point that many of the perpetrators of elder exploitation are relatives. I heard somebody say it probably is somebody that you see in your photo album, and that stuck with me. It's everything from, well, shall we say money management, and I'm being nice when I say money mismanagement. Sometimes it's a need is presenting, there's a special needs child and they really need that money now. Sometimes we have a feeling of entitlement, or this is an advance on my inheritance and I'm going to pay it back, or I'm going to get it anyway, so why not give it to me now, and I can finagle that. Sometimes people say, I'll forget about, Dad will forget about that loan just as soon as I get the money. And then that gives way to true siphoning of funds and signatures on documents to open credit card applications and even redeed the house. To drive home the point about emotional abuse and neglect as a twosome, I had a physically dependent client that I encountered in between her hospital post-surgery for back fusion. This lady would never walk again, and we had to move her to rehab. It was not a nice rehab, and she kept saying, my son Timmy will take care of it. Timmy knows what to do. Timmy was her power of attorney. And so Timmy disappeared. He went on the road for work. He didn't care for Mom. He wouldn't communicate with us. And still, Mom hung on to, Timmy will fix this. Timmy didn't talk to the doctors. Timmy didn't keep her cell phone paid for. Friends stopped coming. Rehab was over, and friends dwindled away. And so while that was neglect, oh, absolutely, it became more emotional abuse as well, because we found out that there was a brother that had died early, and that Timmy was never cared for by his mother. She was in major grief about the son she had lost. She was incapable of caring for the son, and now it's his chance to get back at her, and he left her there. So there's neglect, there's abuse, there's emotion, and there's unfinished business always at play here. And so it's important that we talk about this, because if only 1 in 44 cases of elder frauds ever reported, like the slide said, what about the others that are unreported? Because I don't want you to see my faults, my misgivings. I'm embarrassed. I'm humiliated, or you'll put me out to pasture for sure if you find out that I've been frauded. So it's a huge industry, and there's some pathological reasons that we're going to talk about, some pathology and some more psychology in just a moment about what makes people targets.
Yeah, and so I think that might be a good thing to move right into is talking about what it is that can make elderly people to targets of abuse. And we kind of have some of the more obvious things up on the page here, and I definitely want to hear your thoughts on how mental disease plays a role in that. But I'll pick up on something that you said just a minute ago in terms of, it sounded essentially like privacy concerns, that elderly individual, at least you have generational things that come into play, right, in terms of expectations of privacy, of withholding information. My observation, I wonder what your thoughts about this are, is that in what is our current we'll call it older generation that we have in place, those who are, 60, 70 older, are, I feel like, very prone to withhold financial information, even from close relatives, that there's just more of a sense of, I don't talk about finances, I don't share that kind of information with others. And that also kind of adds to the complexity of being able to aid an individual like that and help them when they need help. But maybe you have thoughts on that or other issues that you've run into that make elderly individual perhaps more prone to be targeted.
You're absolutely right. That's been our experience. Folks from they don't call them the silent generation for nothing. A lot of our elders do play their cards very close to their chest. They're private and they're proud. That's also their independence. And I can't let you see me. I can't let you see my faults because I'm fearful. As an elder, I may feel like I'm declining. I'm not letting anybody show it, but in my heart of hearts, I know there's something wrong, and so I'm scrapping to stay in control. A lot of times, what's going on is a summation. To sum it up, it's pathology and psychology and emotion. Pathology, psychology, and emotion. And in the pathology, we talked on the screen about dementia. Mm-hmm. And you guys are reading those statistics where the older we get, we're going to present with some form of dementia. Our brains are going to deteriorate. And so those stats that you're reading are true. And that's also why we've come to expect a decline in our aging population. We expect memory issues with folks. On the disease part, the pathology part with the Alzheimer's, the frontal temporal, the Lewy body, and the vascular dementia, those are different diseases working on different parts of the brain. And so frontal temporal disease is frontal. There's something going on in the front part of the brain. It's damaged or deteriorating. And vascular dementia is what you would also think. It's a series of strokes that are affecting how the brain is working. You also see that alcohol and drug use long-term, as well as brain injuries and thyroid conditions also cause dementia. And medications do cloud decision-making. It's why they put on the commercials and those little labels on our prescription bottles that warn us not to operate heavy machinery when we're taking this kind of medication. But the bottom line, and the way it was explained to me and still makes sense today, is that as we age, our filters are the first things to go. Mm. Our ability to discern a good decision from a bad decision. The one thing that does persist or remain or prevail is our desire to help people, our desire to help and to be heard. And so this results in problems with judgment and reasoning. Here's an example. We all know that many people are continuing to drive longer than they should. They think they can. We may think differently. But whether or not there's disease going on, there's also the element of loneliness. It's a huge problem. It's getting a lot of press right now as folks in our nursing facilities are unable to have visitors. Families are unable to see their folks that are living in some senior housing. Loneliness is in full bloom. And to a scammer, that's a ripe proposition. They befriend our elders and they fall prey. Loneliness is huge, but also losing your sense of purpose is huge. If we don't have a purpose, for instance, a lot of the folks that I work with were big executives at IBM or Nortel, and they're used to calling the shots. They're used to having their way. Well, maybe they were former military, and they have always given the orders about how things were going to go. And with their filters gone, they fall prey. I actually had one gentleman tell me one time, I know now that I was scammed, but I just wanted to feel like somebody again. And that stayed with me. So there's a lot of emotion. There's monkey business. There's unfinished business. And there's absolutely vulnerability all at play.
Right. Yeah. So Nancy, I'm sure, you know, certainly in my industry, and I imagine in yours as well, I feel like I never see the same situation twice. There may be similarities between different family situations, but you know, for all the reasons that you just articulated there, the background of the family itself, what the relationship was between father and child, or spouse and spouse, or even if you have you know, situations where you have spouses that have remarried, or you know, been married multiple times, and children from different marriages, or if it's not even a parent-child, but like a sibling relationship where you have siblings that are caring for one another. All of those dynamics have an extreme interplay with what you just described in terms of the pathology issues and what kind of actual cognitive problem that they happen to be experienced, because each of those cognitive problems are different. So it really does seem like it can be fairly complex to just try and walk through. Do you feel like that's maybe has to do with part of what you're trying to do at Navigate NC and helping individuals walk through, you know, different situations?
It absolutely impacts the way that we do our work. You know, we're pretty good assessors, pretty good folks at gaining family histories, and we can see that dynamic. And it's imperative that we see the dynamic, that we uncover that. You know, a lot of times when I'm working with attorneys, you guys are seeing it and you're giving it to us to handle or further landscape, if you will. A lot of times we uncover it and we're bringing it to you for resolution and remedy and sometimes litigation. Right.
Well, I want to make sure to kind of honor the time of folk that kind of blocked this hour off. And I'm going to get into a little bit about how I guess the legal elements of this now. So you've spoken quite a bit on, I guess, the realities of what we're facing when it comes to elder abuse. I want to quickly highlight for folk that are in and listening. I know I've seen one individual essentially put in a question. We are going to carve out some time at the end to try and address some questions that pop up. So as we've been talking, if you've thought of some things or you know have additional questions that pop up as we go, please feel free to put those into the chat, and we're going to do our best to try and address those as best we can within the limited time, of course. But I just wanted to highlight that for folk to be thinking about, as we'll probably do that in the next about 10 or 12 minutes or so. But let's talk a little bit for a moment. So, you know, Nancy, you've done a really wonderful job at, I think, kind of explaining for us the complexity of the narrative, like the actual living situation, what families may be facing in terms of their interpersonal relationships, how the individual, again, parent has aged. But I'm sure what we all kind of begin to wonder then is, so when we see it, you know, this elder abuse, this elder exploitation, or when we think that we're seeing it, but we're not sure, you know, well, what is it that we can do? What powers do we have? Well, I want to first start by just talking about the formal. And so that's what's kind of on this page here in front of you. You know, from a legal standpoint, what are the remedies that are provided to us? When talking about a situation where you know of an individual who's acting as an agent for someone else, so this is the power of attorney. There are actually there's a whole segment of our North Carolina statutes that discuss the agent under a power of attorney, the responsibilities and duties that individual has, that they take on, when those duties get triggered, in terms of whether you know, it's one thing for me to be a power of attorney over my spouse, for instance, who may be perfectly fine, and we're very much kind of working in tandem with each other at a younger age. But as we get older, there may arise a time when one or the other spouse is no longer really able to care for him or herself. They might be what we would generically refer to as incapacitated in some way. Well, at that point, the law is going to have a little bit of a different expectation into how a person would behave. We're going to begin to expect that person who's acting, and I'll say proactively on behalf of someone else, to really kind of keep track of what it is that they're doing. Now, depending on the verbiage of your actual power of attorney and statute, you may not necessarily have to actively give accounts, but the expectation is that if called upon, if questioned, that you would be able to say, here's what I have been doing, to have almost an accountant in place with books, statements, and records. And so this is something that the law will also work with individuals to hold that agent to if called. And so you can actually initiate an action if you are an interested person to say, I want to see the accounting. I want to see what they have been doing. I want them to explain where the money is, where it's gone, what's been going on. And so a court can compel an accounting over an agent who's been acting in that particular capacity. Now, of course, that has a lot of interplay with the elderly individual that is being cared for. And like I said, we don't really expect that of an agent when they're not. When the principal, the elderly person, isn't incapacitated yet. So if you tried to initiate this action, like say one of my children, they're adults themselves and coming to me and saying, Dad, I want you to account for what you've been doing for Mom. Well, Mom would probably look at the child and say, no, he doesn't have to do that. I don't want him to do that. And that would be sufficient for the court as well. So that relationship is critical on whether they're, again, incapacitated. But it is proper and possible for people who have an interested status in a family member, a relative, or maybe a creditor or something to that effect, to be able to say, hey, I want to make sure that this person is actually doing what they're supposed to do. That generally is true when we talk about accountings where the law has mandated them. So if you have a kind of a trust situation that's been set up, particularly like in guardianship situation, the court will mandate regular accounting. And so it is also possible through those processes to say, we need maybe a little bit more of a thorough accounting, or I've gotten one, I've seen it, but I'm not sure that this is accurate, and you want to call that into question. So being an interested person in somebody's care is kind of a critical point of legal question. And so sometimes that's something that I'm talking to folk about is, are you an interested person, as the law might define that term? And if you're not, can you become one? And so we might begin to ask those kinds of things about how it is that we can hold somebody else that's acting accountable if we're concerned about what they're doing. In guardianships particularly, we're usually talking about that when the context of actual financial care is in play. But it is possible for a guardianship that you only have, say, a guardianship of the person. And in that case, that individual would only be making medical decisions, care about, what their life decisions look like. And so we wouldn't really be looking to hold them accountable. Outside of that, you almost kind of get into really criminal reporting elements. So calling the police, calling your local district attorney, beginning to have a conversation about what you're seeing. And of course, they're going to want to know, what evidence do you have? How are you getting this? But sometimes you may just need to prompt them that an investigation needs to be done. And they will take that as they see fit, or otherwise advise you to say, well, this is what more we would need from you. And so that can be a way that you go about that. But I want to make sure to hit on this last part here about, what else can be done proactively. So, what I just discussed there in terms of compelling accounting, maybe taking civil actions, guardianships, those are reactive measures that we take when an individual needs to be cared for and looked after. And the law, unfortunately, is very reactive. Problems have already occurred, and now we're trying to fix those problems. So what do you do to kind of help avoid those problems? And I think there was a question that hit on this a little bit, and that is planning. And so as an attorney, while I work with very contentious situations on a regular basis, a lot of what my firm also does is help people with planning ahead with the mind of an imperfect situation. And so it's important that we, before health begins to decline significantly, discuss, and I think ideally as a family, what it is that we expect to see as an elderly individual ages. And so, in your standard situation of, maybe a couple or a couple with children or kind of your nucleus, you want to have those individuals that we all recognize as being, and again, legally interested persons or just next of kin to be on the same page. It's not a bad thing for, one child maybe to take the lead in being a caregiver because of their proximity. And it might not be a bad thing for one child to take the lead in financial management, maybe because of their background. They happen to actually be an accountant or a financial advisor. But what you want is for everybody to have an understanding that that's the way that it should be. And most importantly, that that's the way that the elderly individual that we're talking about wants to see that happen. Nancy, I know you hit on a lot about the fact that individuals can be preyed upon because they are lonely and they're not getting a lot of attention. From a planning perspective, having an understanding of who are the family members that are going to be actively involved in someone's life. If you have a sibling and that sibling maybe never got married, never had children, and they're living alone, it probably would be a really productive thing for their benefit and everybody else's to make sure that you know who it is that's regularly interacting with your sibling. If it's not you, who is it? And where are these people coming from? Are they people that you've known for a long time? Showing interest in their personal life and being active in their personal life will help to be able to avoid a kind of ongoing exploitation. Because that's when a person who's trying to take abuse of a situation that's going to thrive is when they're all alone. There's nobody checking in. There's nobody looking to see what's happening. And they can essentially just get away with what they want because there's nobody to challenge them. And so, these are not legal remedies, but they're probably just as critical, if not more critical, when trying to work through those things. Well, I want to make sure, and so we if we have any additional questions and folk are on that want to chat and send those in, this would be a good time to send those over. But Nancy, I may have glossed over some important points, but were there things or anything that you thought would be helpful that in terms of articulating, what individuals might do to help avoid elder abuse, elder exploitation, that either you feel like I should comment on or that you would like to comment on?
Well, and just writing in your draft, if you will, we do need to stay in touch with folks that are important to us. I think the biggest slogan I can say is talk. So it doesn't seem so weird when you do come up with a tender situation. Yeah. Talk early, talk often. The planning, the legal planning, get your legal affairs in order, and talk to folks talk to your loved ones about what you want. Know what they want. Yeah. And talk about it a lot. And these are hard situations. They're things that I blog and teach about. But it's really, really important that you do know what's going on and what your loved ones or those that are significant to you want. And it's important that they know it about you. There are, other than the legal avenues, for remedy, you can have a relationship with your elder's banker. Banks are trained to be frontline folks to get get their antenna up on behalf of Mrs. Jenkins, and she's on her way to the bank, and she's coming here. She's getting a big fat cashier's check, and it may be a good idea that the banker could be signaled to step in, take a look, kind of act as a check and balance. Folks can be placed on their elders' bank accounts. And and just know that there are a lot of people that are working on remedy. It's the case managers, it's the attorneys, it's the bankers, and the Attorney General's office. In North Carolina, our Attorney General's office does an outstanding job with a special section on elder fraud, senior scams. They not only have a wonderful website and toll-free numbers to whom you can report, but they maintain relationships with wire transfer companies. Like if somebody's buying gift cards or wiring large accounts of money, the attorney, and it's discovered, the Attorney General can often intercept. And so there's a lot of people ready, but you're right, it's reactive. We need to see it and spot it.
Right. Well, let me hit a little bit on some of the chats that are coming in, and we'll take these one at a time. So there was one that indicated here, and I'll kind of generalize as a scenario where somebody has a parent living in the home with them, old age, but still good health, but no formal legal authority in place. And so the question was, should that person have something in writing in case health starts to fail? So I think the first thought is to always see if that individual is able and willing to designate an agent while they're able to do so, right? So if you have an elderly individual, you want to provide as much as you can an impartial avenue for them to be able to decide who it is that they would want caring for them. And a power of attorney, both a financial power of attorney and then a healthcare power of attorney, is where you want to start. And so what can be very critical here, though, especially, and with that particular scenario of having somebody who's in your home, the outside perception can be that the elderly individual may have been somehow unduly influenced, potentially, if you wind up being the one just by happenstance that's named to be the trusted person, right? And so what becomes really important there is, if you have other siblings, other family members that are closely related, that, think themselves that they might be in that position, that they understand what's happening, that they're in agreement with it, that there's openness of conversation. But if you can't get your mother or father to do that, to have that conversation, maybe because, like what we discussed earlier, the silent generation, they're keeping it close to the chest, then at bare minimum, you want to provide some kind of an impartial avenue, their own attorney that they get, that they have communications with, that you have no involvement with, and whatever decision they make, but they're allowed to do that themselves, so that ideally, they'll do what they want and what's right for them, but with appropriate guidance and consultation. If they're in a position, though, where you feel like you're having to make them do something, or you feel like you're having to get power of attorney, that's key language for me whenever I'm listening, because at that point, you're not really talking about somebody voluntarily doing something. You're talking about trying to take or get, and that's really more guardianship. And that's reactive. We're too late. And that's okay. It may very well be the case. You can't do power of attorney anymore. And you go the route of guardianship. That's not, it's not the end of the world. It's not as ideal, but it's still an option that you have. And so that's a key distinction in that kind of a scenario. Have you gotten to a point where you feel like you're having to, make your parent do something or take something from them? Because that's no longer power of attorney. That's more guardianship. Somebody else suggested that one way to kind of work with family might be to have a designated challenger, and I'll look into that term later. But I think the idea that's being said here is having a clear definition of who it is that can perhaps help with accounting. So for instance, in a power of attorney, we might generically say, you don't have to account to anybody, the court, whatever. I don't want you to have to flaunt my private financial information to others. But it's also perfectly acceptable to say, well, but if my, say, successor power of attorney comes to you and says, hey, what's happening, that you do need to account to them, or my children, or something to that effect. And you can say that it's appropriate and right to account to specific people. That way, just kind of giving that agent a sense of, again, accountability, of knowing that they're not just with unfettered control. So that's not a bad idea, and it's something that can be discussed. And then let's see here real quick. And I'll answer this one a little more curtly, that there was an indication of, a sole child, that's the one doing the caregiving. If they do reasonable counting and of their funds, and they have clear track record of care, is that enough to ward off elder abuse accusations? I would hope so, I guess, would be the answer. But one thing that we always have to know is that in our American system, people can file claims, people can make accusations. They might get in trouble if they've done so without any basis whatsoever. But oftentimes, if there's enough to think that there could be a problem, we're probably going to give them an out if they made the accusation out of an abundance of caution. And so what is important to note from that is that there really isn't anything that you can do when you're in a position of trust to avoid any questioning of your authority or your rightness of your action, other than just being able to know that you did what was right. And so that's going to be really critical. If you're in that position of trust, you cannot take that for granted, that just because you've been given a paper, a document, that you're beyond any kind of accountability. It is best for you to always be thinking to yourself, I may have to account for what I've done, and be ready to do that, and just know that you've done what's right. And then we'll wrap up. We're a little bit over here, but let's see here. The question, Nancy, I'll read this out for you. Does Nancy have any advice for the opposite abuse? So where it sounds like a girlfriend, 65, is taking care of a mom in her 80s, and is believing that there might be some emotional abuse. You take care of me, I'll do this for you. If you want to remain in my will. I guess she has thoughts about, Nancy, whether you have, how do you engage the emotional complexity of a situation where you have, again, like in this scenario, a trusted friend taking care of an elderly individual, and maybe trying to leverage, that you're going to, and I think what they're saying is that the elderly individual is actually trying to get the younger person to do things by saying, I'll cut you out of my will if you don't. That's an interesting one. But do you have any thoughts on that, Nancy?
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't it funny how that emotional abuse goes both ways? It's important in this kind of scenario, and thank you for bringing that up, that folks are using whatever they can to get whatever outcome that they want, whether they're honest about it or not. The point I want to really make for everybody that's listening, and Adam had made it so well, it's important that we get our legal documents done. It's important that we work further up the line and get your power of attorney, designate your agents. Who's going to speak for me, for my health care, for my finances? Who will speak for me when I cannot? And a lot of times the day-to-day caregiving, it's the best person for the job. Maybe Joni in New Jersey is a banker, and so she's the logical person to take on the finances. And Betty is 5 minutes down the road, so she's the natural boots on the ground front line. But then there's Kevin in California, and he's wondering what he can do. His contribution can be that he is flying in to give respite to the the front line, so that person, we extend the life of the person who's the most encumbered. So a lot of times it's just having eyes on people, looking for the best person to serve, building a team of trusted individuals. And to me, that's the legal, financial, the attorney, the financial professional, whether that's a financial planner or a CPA or another, sometimes daily money managers step in here. And then some sort of care manager, patient advocate. I often serve as the objective third party. Soundboard sometimes, but also somebody that I see all the perspectives, and I can offer counsel to my client. But we do see those dynamics that was described in the chat there, often both ways.
Yeah. One of my favorite analogies in that position of trust, and I oftentimes use it in the guardianship context when somebody's just recently been nominated and appointed to act as a guardian for somebody, and they're now going to have to be involved with the court, and they're trying to navigate their responsibilities. But it applies whether you're a guardian or an agent or a trustee. Essentially, you are a quarterback. You're a person that is calling the shots. You get your team, you huddle, you fan out, and then you run the play. And the quarterback, they don't run the ball traditionally. They can sometimes, but that's usually not as good as just giving it to your running back. The quarterback, maybe they could technically catch a pass if somebody else threw it, but we kind of expect the quarterback to throw, not to catch. The quarterback could block, but they're not going to weigh as much as those guys on the front line who know how to defend and to push back against difficulty and struggle, right? And so we don't expect the quarterback to block. There's all the people on the team with very specific roles and functions. We also don't expect the quarterback to go on the field by himself, right? Or herself.
Right.
We expect the quarterback to go out with a team. So if anything you kind of hear today as we're wrapping up, and you're in a position of trust, and you're even thinking, gosh, I don't want to be in that position where I'm inadvertently looking like I'm committing abuse, or taking advantage of a situation, or just not doing a good job. Remember that you're not expected to do this by yourself. And you will probably do a better job with a team around you. So let's see here. I had the Hopler, Wilms, and Hanna information up there. I've got to navigate NC. So definitely, if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Nancy. I believe both of our information was generally made available at the beginning and here at the end, and in the advertisements for today's webinar. We would love to be of assistance to anybody that's just trying to understand their situation and to navigate it. And so that's what both of us are doing. So I hope this was helpful. I know we can't answer all information, in this kind of context, but we are trying to just highlight ideas and thoughts and get gears turning, so that hopefully you can help those around you to guide them in the right direction, and ultimately do our elderly loved ones right. Because that's what we all want to see happen, is that folk are taken care of in the way that we want to be taken care of eventually down the road. So, Nancy, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation today.
It's I who thanks you and the folks that are listening for your patience. It's an important conversation. I do invite emails and inquiries into our firm. We offer a free consultation, so I'm happy to talk to folks. I'm happy to, if you have other topics, want to dig a little deeper in this topic, or have other legal questions that might let Adam and I know, and we'll come back with more information for you.
That sounds like a plan. All right. Well, everybody, I wish you the best to the rest of your afternoon. With that, we'll close out. Yeah, Nancy, you too. All right, everybody, take care.
Thanks, everyone.